All right, let's negotiate. Okay, in all seriousness, let's talk about negotiating raises and salaries. One of my other most requested videos is negotiations, salary negotiations. So in a prior video, I talked about how much money can you make in cybersecurity, and in this video, we're going to talk about how do you actually negotiate raises and how can you increase your salary and income in cybersecurity. Now, salary negotiation is not unique to cybersecurity in the slightest. Of course, every job has potential for being able to make more money, potentially, depending on what you're doing. I'm sure there are jobs where there's no such thing as a raise, so I can't say all jobs guaranteed to have raise potential. But in cybersecurity, there is a significant amount of potential for making a lot more money than whatever it is you're making. And I was requested to not just share how to get a raise, but share a little bit of my background. I don't typically like to talk about my background for some reason. It's just one of those things. I'm just like, oh, talk about myself? That's weird. But I'm going to tell you anyways, because why else am I making this channel and talking about things anyways? So, when you're trying to negotiate a raise, there are a lot of things to think about. It's usually not a very straightforward trajectory to be able to get yourself a $5,000, $10,000, $40,000, or even just straight up double your salary. And if you're making, more than $40,000 and you double your salary, that's a pretty massive bump. So when you're trying to figure out how much money can you make at a certain company, or how much money can you make in general, there's a series of things that I always think about because I think a lot about how can I make as much money as possible, and how can I get bigger raises, and how can I... Who doesn't want to make more money? So that's a thing that I've always thought about, so I'm sure you've thought about it. And another thing that I have always done is I like to help other people get raises, and I help people get raises on a regular basis. This is not an unusual or new thing for me. So it's not just me who gets all of these massive raises. Getting giant raises, even if you consider $5,000 raise a giant raise, that's a massive raise too, and good for you. Any raise is a good raise. And if you want to figure out how to make, say, 6 figures as a target long term, or maybe you're wanting to make 6 figures tomorrow, which probably won't happen, here's what you need to think about. So, thought number 1, do you have a valuable skill set that companies are willing to pay a lot of money for? Now, in cybersecurity, if all you know how to do is answer a phone call, that's a valuable enough skill to get started where you can get hired at a help desk, learn certain things, or maybe you know just enough to follow directions. So you get hired as a quality assurance professional where you test cybersecurity products, software, and anything that needs testing for quality assurance purposes. In terms of developing valuable skills, you can either look online and see what types of roles pay more. I'll tell you right now that software engineering in the cybersecurity space pays a significant amount of money, and data science in the cybersecurity space pays a significant amount of money. Advanced analysis, which is usually about the same as just doing data science. Some of these more technical roles pay a lot more, and also sales engineers can walk away with an astronomical amount of money, and cybersecurity salespeople who sell high-ticket cybersecurity products, maybe you are a cybersecurity salesperson and you sell platforms or tools that cost companies, $5 million, $20 million per purchase. You only need to get one sale a year, and you get that one sale, bam, you get 5% commission off of a $5 million sale. Okay, so you're going to make a lot of money. But those are some of the higher paying jobs, and cybersecurity consultants tend to make a lot of money as well. These are some of the higher paid titles that I'm mentioning right now. So we're trying to figure out what skill set can we actually get that's going to allow us to be capable of making more money. And also just being very good at management, that can get you paid a lot. And also product management pays a lot as well. So think about it. Are you good with people? Figure that out. Are you better with machines? Figure that out. Are you really good at selling things? Figure that out. Are you good at managing people or projects? Figure that out. Figure out what type of high-end skill you might be good at. And everyone's different. So someone who is a data scientist might make the same amount as a software engineer who makes the same amount as a product manager. They might all make the same amount of money, but the product manager is probably not technical, and the salesperson probably makes the most, and the salesperson isn't technical at all and might not even be good at managing people, but they can sell things. So you want to come up with your high-end skill. Do you want to be a salesperson in the cybersecurity space? Someone who really knows the space so well that you know what people need and you know what's going to get them to buy something that's going to make a difference for their business and walk away with a giant check. Are you the type of person who's really good at managing people and figuring out what people need, but maybe you're not technical? Okay, you could be a product manager or a project manager or a scrum manager. There's all these different types of positions. If you are technical, you could get into software engineering, network engineering, just something very specialized. Get highly specialized in a technical role, and you will also be of high demand and high value. You could also become a CISO, and maybe that's your life goal and dream, is to become a CISO so that you can be an executive and a cybersecurity professional at the same time. So you need to figure out what is it that you can do to build a nice high-end skill. Next, just because you have a high-end skill doesn't mean you can make more money. You can actually be incredibly advanced and make $40,000 a year. I have met these people. Half the time they don't know that they could probably make a lot more money, and half the time they also don't care that they could make a lot more money, because if they're making $40,000 a year, they're probably doing something they believe in, like working for a nonprofit and doing things that have a national impact on either society or the environment or something probably pretty sweet, or their job's just super fun on top of that. Who knows? But talk about purpose. You might not get paid very well to have a purpose in life. You might be one of those lucky few who also finds purpose in things that makes money. So you need to figure out what types of companies pay. A nonprofit's not going to pay you a lot of money. That's why I mentioned the scenario of a nonprofit. If you are like, I want to work in cybersecurity and I want to help nonprofits be more secure. Well, unless you plan on somehow becoming a person who funds and backs nonprofits or provides the tools to the nonprofits, don't prioritize salary. Prioritize other things. You're not doing it for the money. Alternatively, if you want to work for a small company, think about how much money does this small company make. Usually there are annual meetings where companies will talk about, what type of revenue they have. You can look them up online. You can usually data mine how much money an employer has. And if an employer only has, and I say only, because if you're an employee and you have $2 million in the bank and you just work at a company, then you're rich. But a company that has $2 million in the bank, that's not necessarily rich. As a matter of fact, if they have like one technical team of 10 people getting paid six figures each, then they're paying at least $1 million out to employees and staff. That money isn't kept for the company. So if a company has, 30, 40, 50 people and they got, $1 million in revenue, they're spending more than they're getting in revenue. So they're not rich. They're not going to be the company that is going to be like, oh yeah, we'll pay you $300,000 salary. Yeah. Oh yeah, we'll give you some, nice $20,000, $40,000 bonuses. It's just not going to happen. It's very important to understand that. And I've seen people get really frustrated working at companies that have very little to low spending power. And oftentimes, like, people running small companies, like, they hate to admit that they don't have money to pay competitively sometimes. Now, some people hate paying competitively and just want to underpay everyone. I know you people exist out there. Some of you are just like, I'm not paying anyone. I just want to, like, pay everyone minimum wage and have people who probably should make six figures and pay them, $15 an hour, because, they're the high-end ones, and then everyone else gets whatever, like, I don't know, $8.50 an hour. I don't know what minimum wage is. I feel like $8.50 is pretty low these days. But companies got to have enough money to pay. So now, if we start looking at, say, Fortune 500s, companies that have internal development teams, or big cybersecurity companies, or even a small private company that makes a lot of money. There might be a small company that makes, $500 million a year or $50 million a year. Well, if the company's making $50 million a year, now you can start to strategize and come up with ways to make more money. So if a company seems to have paying power, then there's a couple of things to consider. How big is the company? If the company is not very big, then it's a little harder to build a strategy for getting a raise, because you can't negotiate until you even have a strategy for where are you going to get the money, how are you going to get the money, what type of company you're going to work for, what type of skill are you going to provide. What type of skill are you going to provide to a company that has a lot of money? This is how you need to be thinking before you even get to thinking about negotiations. You have to figure these things out. So there's no such thing as getting a $200,000 salary from a company that's makes like $5 million a year. Like, sometimes that'll happen and they'll be like, oh yeah, we can pay this person a pretty good penny. But $5 million a year, they probably want to try to expand the business, probably, and paying someone $300,000 a year, it's not within budget. It's not a good idea for this company. It's not going to help them. And if anything, it would make more sense to fire you if they can't pay you less than $300,000 a year, because they can't sustain that. So, companies. Big companies understand that you can move around. So the strategy is, if it's a big company, I can get hired at almost any level. This is a good mindset. If it's a huge company, I can get hired at almost any level. Now, if you're already a practitioner and you're very skilled, you probably don't go and get underpaid. Try to get paid competitively. But if you get hired at a big company at any level, you just have a lot of room to wiggle your way up and make more money and climb into different positions. You have opportunities there. There's a lot you can do. Really big companies usually have massive budgets, and we'll get into the negotiation after we keep talking about company profiles. Now, small companies that are really affluent, they might not have a lot of places for you to move. So things are a lot more personal. Everyone probably feels like a little tiny family. Everyone sees each other every day, or at least talks to each other almost every day, if not every day. So you know each other real well. And it's not like, if there's you and then a director's above you who's like over a bunch of other departments. Maybe they have like 4 departments, and maybe they have like 60 people. Or maybe we even make it a smaller company. Maybe it's 4 departments and it's 20 people. It's just a real small company. Then you have a director above you, and then you have an executive above you. You're not probably going to replace that director unless they quit, and you're most certainly not going to become an executive, most likely. It could happen, but that does come into the negotiation side, which we will get into. So you want to figure out, with a small company, how can you help them make more money, and then use the amount of money that you help them make as a negotiation tool, which we will get into. But it starts with helping them make money first for an easy negotiation later. So, big company, don't worry about it. Small company, you probably need to figure out, what will my high-end skill do to help them make more money? Now, if you're a salesperson, that's easy. Like that's painfully easy. You just start getting some big commissions and help make sure that products get sold and kill it. Okay, so that's a boring answer. So let's move away from sales. If you're in a technical position, you're going to have to come up with something. So we'll get into that where it's a little more challenging. Or you could always just go to another company if you don't want to really get into the nitty gritty for trying to create your own position or create something special or unique or create something new for the company. It gets complicated if we actually want big raises and things to work out. So we've gone through the profiling, have a skill, know what type of company that, do they have money? Does the company have money? And then are they big or are they small or medium? But those three things pretty much have to be understood before you really get into trying to negotiate a raise. If you don't know those things, then you might be trying to just waste your time. So, on to negotiation and strategizing and structuring negotiations. So, I know this is a lot of information. It's a really complicated subject because if you want to consistently get raises, that's not something that's easy. So now you are in the game for trying to figure out how to actually get like a big raise. You're working for a company, you got hired, and you want a $10,000 raise at least. But if you can get a $40,000 raise, that's something else to think about. So a few other things to assess with our three preliminaries before getting into negotiation is how much money are you already making? Are you approaching a ceiling for average pay or above average pay comparatively to, say, market pay? Are you violently underpaid? It's much easier to get massive raises if you're violently underpaid, and that can happen. Did your company get like a big bonus, or did they win some big commission or something along those lines where you might be able to talk into something around this newfound money that the company has received and they had this big celebration? But how much money do you currently have, and what's the current climate of the company? Is the company currently in a quarter? Because if we have 4 business quarters, is it a quarter that's working out well where the sales targets are being hit? If sales targets aren't being hit, then people usually are stressed out about budget. And if you come in asking for a raise when like sales are low and you don't have other plans in mind for, how are you going to help benefit them by making the budget worse after they didn't hit their sales targets, you got to think about that and how much money you make. So let's say that you make, well, let's just go with the scenario from my life. Let's say that you make $50,000 a year and you want to get another $40,000. So you want to make like $90,000, right? So it might sound like a lot of money, and it is. It's not an amount of money to undermine, but going from 50 to 90, to a lot of people that sounds impossible. I just remember I hear people sometimes and they'll be like, oh, if you want to get like a $20,000 or $40,000 bump in pay, you have to leave your company and go apply somewhere else for a higher salary. That's an option. That is an option, but it's not necessary. And in some ways, you can actually get more benefit out of getting an internal raise that you've engineered and designed through negotiation. So think about the current situation of the company. Think about the current climate. Think about how much you're getting paid at the moment. Making $50,000 a year, you want to get to 90. So you need to figure out a couple things. So where are you in the hierarchy of the company? Whether it's a big or a small company, you probably have a boss that you report to. And then your boss potentially has a boss that they report to. And then you need to figure out what's the chain all the way up to the top. Because whoever that chain is, they have to be the executives, or if there's a board that the company has to adhere to, whoever's in control of the money has to be okay with an amount of money coming out of the budget to give you higher pay on a whim, just out of the blue. If you're a superstar employee, sometimes it's an easy negotiation, but sometimes superstar employees, it's not earned. Sometimes it's just favoritism. It happens all the time. So if you can figure out how to be a favorite, that's one thing to start with. If you don't like being that person who tries to be a company favorite, you have options. goes back to having a real good skill and being real good at it and figuring out how to make your company more money with that skill. So, this is I'm trying to figure out the simplest way to explain this without making it really complicated. So when you start to enter into a negotiation, there's a series of things that you need to consider. Now, this is the structure of a negotiation as I negotiate. So the first thing that you want to think about when you're trying to engage someone for a negotiation is, what are you going to do for them? What are you going to do for them? Because you're asking for this massive raise. You want money. They know you want money. Everyone wants money. And, you might be able to talk to them, might be like, oh, we could give you a $5,000 raise. Oh, if you know how to play your cards, that's negotiable. And sometimes, I'll give you the scenario after the fact, there are ways to get an increased raise later on, which sounds very confusing right now without more context. But you can get a bigger raise than whatever they provide you if you just walk in and say, how much money can I get in a raise? And you can just start with that. You can't just walk into the office and be like, how do I get a raise at this company? That's probably the first place to start. And if you literally just walk up to your supervisor and be like, how do I get a raise at this company? They might have a useful answer or a not very useful answer. A useful answer would be where they actually tell you steps for how you can actually get a raise. And then a not so helpful answer is they might just be like, why are you asking about a raise right now? And they just don't really want to talk to you about it. That's another potential possibility. So if you know whoever's at the top of the chain, in terms of what are you going to do for me, if your supervisor is not the person who commands the budget to give you a raise, which oftentimes they're not, unless you work directly under an executive, well, then you're going to have to come up with something that's going to make your boss feel like they need to go to their higher up to really make sure that you get this raise. And that's a complicated thing to think about. So then you need to think about, what does your manager want? What would make your manager's day better? I'm not saying that you need to brown nose, but let's say that you every day come in and your manager, if you just go and sit in their general vicinity for an hour a day, you're going to get a manager who just eventually will start complaining about the things that bother them. And so if you have a manager who's complaining about the things that bother them every time you come into the office, then you can start to collect that information. Don't give them too much feedback, just listen. Step number one is listen to your supervisor. Figure out what they need, figure out what makes them feel good about themselves. And your goal is to come up with something that's going to make them feel like it's worth their time to go to war for you and try to basically go have a very uncomfortable conversation with the powers that be above them to get you some more money. And if you're asking for a big raise, that's a very stressful thing to go and negotiate to the higher ups. So you're going to have to alleviate some of that, because put yourself in the shoes of your manager. If you are the manager and then they come up to you and they're like, yeah, I want to go from $50,000 a year to $90,000 a year. Can we make that happen immediately? You're going to look at them like they're crazy. And then not only are you going to look at them like they're crazy, then you're also going to be like, wait a minute. A, you're out of your mind. B, I don't want to go even have that conversation with my boss, who told me that we have no more budget. My boss was like, yeah, you have no more budget and you can't hire anyone else right now. And so you're going to have to work with what you got. And even though, the company has money and that they have the power to pay more and things like that, if it's inconvenient. It's inconvenient if you're the manager, putting yourself in the manager's shoes, and you have to go and try to talk to them about this big raise when you're not even... Why? It's just adding stress to you. It's adding stress to the people above you. If you even engage the conversation, it causes tension, genuine tension. As a matter of fact, tension is what causes raises to potentially work out, but it has to be the right kind of tension, not just straight stress. And just everyone's stressed out because now, we're shifting budgets for no good reason. So if you've been listening to your manager, you can start to come up with some things that will make them feel better and some things that might help them. And then the other thing is also, if you find out that your manager doesn't make more than what you're trying to make, then you might want to even talk to your manager to figure out how you can help your manager get a raise. And first talk to your manager about helping them get a raise, because if you help your manager get a raise with this advice that I'm giving you, just what I'm talking about in this video, just go through the process with them, give it to them, and then if they get a raise, you're going to have a manager who's astronomically more likely to be very interested and be like, oh, like you helped me get this big raise. Like I always wanted to make 6 figs as a manager, and you're just trying to make 90. You're not even asking for 6 figs. Maybe the manager was at 75 and you were at 50. And so you get that manager that 6 figs and you're like, well, I want 90. Then there you go. And they're going to be a lot more open because you did something for them. Because when you go to someone, what are you going to do for them? If you can't come up with something that you're going to do for them, it's probably not going to work out. In my case and scenario, what I ended up doing was I started developing additional products for the company that they could also sell. And then I started coming up with different checklists, and I started helping out other teams and departments and speeding up their stuff so that they don't need to hire more people. And I just increased the value of everything that I do. And that's what I did, where everyone's job was suddenly easier. And then when I went and started talking raises, my manager is like, let me just give you let's just give you like a $25,000 raise, which that wasn't the end of it, because I actually ended up getting a much bigger raise, but that was the beginning. And so let's get into story time I just talked about the general idea is do something for your manager. So let me talk about my situation. I was making about $50,000 a year, and I wanted more money. And so, I made another video about reverse engineering. You can listen to that if you want more details on how I ended up learning a whole lot about what made me incredibly valuable at the company. So I just started writing automation tools for people like other consultants and other people in training departments, and I just started making everyone's jobs easier. And that's what I did. And then I was going to talk to my manager about getting a big raise because I wanted to be at 90. And my manager was like, well, I don't know at first. And I didn't tell them how much money I wanted to make. But I dropped it, and then a few months later, my manager is just like, I just need to give you this raise like now. And we don't want to lose you. We appreciate you. We don't want someone else to get you instead. We want you to stay. We want you to be happy. And my manager just came out and just gave me the raise because they're like, you make our lives so much easier here. Like, having you in the office makes my day less stressful. Having you in the office makes me feel better when I go home. I sleep better at night. That's what I did for my manager. And I wasn't brown nosing. As a matter of fact, half the time I wasn't even talking to him. I was just helping other people because I knew that he was bogged down by other things. And yeah, I do want to raise. Like, if I can do something to get more money, I'm going to. Like, why not? It makes sense. So I think most people want to raise anyways, but that wasn't the end of it. So on top of that, as things progressed, I ended up moving over to a different part of the company, and I got a small raise, but it wasn't what I wanted at the time. But more importantly, what ended up happening is after a bunch of other things and some negotiation, and I actually started developing a new product for the company and helping develop some different research and whatnot. And I ended up getting a raise that was back paid, ended up just getting back paid to when I got the other raise. And then at the end of the day, like, I got a massive payout, just a big payout of all the money that I would have made had I had already gotten that raise, as if I had just gotten a $45,000 raise. So then I just ended up with a lot more money, and my salary was a lot higher, like right then and there. And And that's how I ended up getting like a $45,000 raise. Might be TMI, but there you go. I just shared that story to the world. It's a weird to talk about how much money you made in the past. But I digress. The point is, you can negotiate raises as well. So these are things that I help other people do, and in order to get a big raise, you have to figure out like what's going to help the company make more money, what's going to increase your value, what's going to increase your value. Make the company more money, make your manager more money, help other people, make their jobs easier. Every minute that you save someone else, that saves the company money too, because you're ramping up productivity. You're making the company money if you're making other people more productive by doing things like writing automation tools for them. You can write automation tools for your coworkers, and you'll get yelled at for the billables that you're not getting, or you'll get yelled at for not doing the job you're supposed to be doing, until everyone else loves you because like you make everyone else's jobs easier, and they're like, well, you make our lives easier, so we're not going to get rid of you because you didn't do all of your work. Still hit your deadlines, but it's how you negotiate a big raise. Now, when it gets to being like a large raise, when you're making $90,000 a year or $100,000 a year, it's a lot more difficult to negotiate larger raises. Once again, the biggest trump card in making a larger raise when you're already making $150,000, $180,000, if you want to crack $200,000 and so on, you can start to negotiate commissions options, or you can talk about, helping them develop other tools with the product management to figure out how you can help the company make more money with something that you can provide or contribute, maybe help out with sales. Start hunting down what would make the company more money and have some very uncomfortable conversations. Very uncomfortable conversations. I've had some very uncomfortable conversations. And sometimes, if you're just trying to make more money, and some of those amounts are more than what I made in the corporate world, but I did make 6 figures at some point in the corporate world. But what matters more than making 6 figures is helping people anyways. So if you're just doing what matters, that matters more than the money. But the money will follow if you're doing things that matter. And that's a real thing. It can require, once again, so let's say I have an example of someone who ended up making a raise that was like $20,000, and they were already making $100,000. They were making like $109,000. I don't even remember the exact amount, but it was 6 figures. And in order for them to make more money, they started talking to their manager to ask if they could get into certain meetings with some of the executives to see if they could come up with some ideas. They got turned down time and time again, but after about a number of times, I'm sure it was more than 3-4 times, that they just kept being like, can I be in part of some of these meetings? Can I see if I can help you guys make more money? I was like, just say it that way. Say, can I help you guys make more money? If you make it about money, then great. So they ended up coming up with something that professional, they were able to start charging for a new service. So they started charging for a new service that cost more. And then it was a new service that they also built a new little team around. And then that little team billed a significant amount of money, a lot more money than what they were billing for their standard services. And they just created a higher ticket service. And they weren't salespeople, but they got a commission for the type of work that it is, more professional services work, which is more or less like consulting. Professional services engineers and consultants are oftentimes the same thing. It just really depends on the company and what they do and how they structure their titles. But it's just another story, someone who got another big raise. And people who do tend to, that I've talked to, who make over $200,000 a year, usually they get some sort of commission off of something, and they negotiated being able to do something that allows them to get some sort of commission. or they join certain sales meetings and help close certain deals and do certain demos around closing those deals, and do, maybe it's an engineer who does some sales engineering. There's a principal engineer making like $200,000, and I was just asking him about his career in general, but he went from $200,000 to getting commissions on top of that because he wanted to also do sales engineering. So he'd get commission for helping close big multi-million dollar deals. He's already making $200,000 base salary. He gets a bonus on top of that. I think after the bonus, he's making $240,000 a year, something like that. And I know some of these numbers sound big, and they are. I'm not undermining that. That's a lot of money. That's an amount of money that very few people will ever see. But in order to get paid that kind of money, there has to be a lot of discomfort and strategy and things that you're willing to spend 6 months very strategically structuring something that's going to be beneficial in a way that's going to turn into more money, talking to people, keeping the conversations going, not dropping it, being annoying if that's what it takes, being needy to your employer if that's what it takes. And if you're, once again, if oftentimes when layoffs come around, if you end up with a high salary and you're not bringing a return on investment to a company, then you're the first one to get on the chopping block. They fire those high salaries. So you want to think about what's your return on the company's investment. Like what's the company's return on investment for hiring you? If the company's return on investment for hiring you is a couple $1 million, then it's a lot easier to justify paying you $200,000 a year, as to where if they have a position where they just need someone who can answer phones, and that person's making $90,000 a year and they're not really making a whole lot of money, like at the end of the day, like they can just have someone else answer phones more. So if the person doesn't have a whole lot of utility and return on investment to the company, where they're saving the company more than, or making the company more than what their salary is, those high salaries get you on the chopping block if you aren't the person who is driving money to the company. So it really does come down to, how can I drive more money to this company, and how can I put myself in an uncomfortable situation where I'm going to go talk to the executives, or I'm going to keep trying to talk to the executives. I'm a person who's notorious for talking to executives at companies, and then that turns into things where I end up with more shares at companies, and I end up with higher salaries than other people. And it's not luck. It's very strategic. I'm not working at a company right now because I'm building my own, which is a whole nother thing. But it's something to think about. And there's a lot to think about for that as well. It's a lot. It's absolutely a lot. And this is a lot too. So I feel so bright right now. Anyways, the sun shines on another day, and the sun shines on this video. So if you have more questions about negotiation, go ahead and ask all the negotiation questions that you can, and I will see if I can make more videos around how to negotiate. I actually have a litmus test that I use for myself, and some other things that I use as measurables to know how a negotiation is going to work. If a negotiation fails, I have ways for how I reframe my negotiation to not get people to just stop listening to me or stop talking to me, because if you annoy people enough, they stop talking to you, and that's a real thing that happens all the time if you're real annoying. And I've been real annoying, and you can be real annoying too, and you don't want to be too annoying. But if you like this type of content, subscribe to my channel. Ask more questions if you have them. This is Nato, and you can ask me questions like I just said. Have a good day. And I did make a cybersecurity qualifications guide that you can use to see what types of jobs you might be qualified for right now if you aren't already working in cybersecurity, so that you can get the job first, so that you can then start to apply to jobs. And if you do sign up for the cybersecurity qualifications guide, then I'll go ahead and send you another email that has an interview preparation checklist that I also made and I can send that to you as well if you sign up for the qualifications guide. And that's it for this video.